Less than an hour away from the concrete sprawl of the capital, on twisty mountain roads through spectacular forests, the pavement becomes the make-you-car-sick cobblestones of La Antigua Guatemala, in a valley cradled by 3 volcanoes. All of the one-story houses in Antigua have to be either yellow, ochre, orange, Tuscan red, or blue, or white, and the paint is crumbling off the side of every wall at waist height because of the humidity. Some of the walls are scarred from years of neglect, and all of the colors they've been painted in the past show through. It's part of the charm of the city, and the municipal government makes sure that charm will be forever preserved by not letting anyone spruce the place up. As we bumped along the cobbles, we passed ruins with halves of arches curving into the sky, their walls cracking from plants growing through them. Colonial-era mansions, churches, and convents shared their blocks with convenience stores, bars, and travel agents, but it was all a blur because my head was buzzing with confusion. Elizabeth and Toto had been talking the entire time in Spanish, the whole way from the airport, with occasional nods to me where I sulked in the back seat. No acknowledgement of my relationship with her, no "how I've missed you," nothing. It was as if, in the 2 weeks since we last made love, we'd become strangers again. And she was the only person I knew in this brand new world that would have been the start of a brave adventure, but instead was very scary. And they weren't talking to me at all, as if I didn't merit more than a casual, "How was your flight?" Eventually, we bumped down a long tree-lined road and came to the gate of a small housing community. A wave to the guard, who unhooked and dropped the chain across the entry, and we were in. Finally, Elizabeth turned in her seat to look at me with dark-circled eyes. "Home sweet home," she said with little warmth. I glanced at the back of Toto's neck, at the pimple on it, and cut my eyes back to Elizabeth, who made a tiny, almost imperceptible shrug, almost as if to say, "Don't worry about it," but without enough effort. Like it didn't matter at all that this guy in the driver's seat was the man she'd warned me to stay away from at all costs, that he was dangerous, violent, and heavily armed, and given to drink excessive amounts on weekdays, and friends with enough of the police to get away with anything he did. "And don't let him pretend to become your friend," she'd told me. "Don't entertain any conversation with him." Yet, here we are. The car jolted sickeningly to a stop in front of a beautiful colonial-style house, and we spilled out onto a warm evening. Some loud bird was squawking in a tall tree next to us, but aside from that, there was a peaceful, reassuring silence. Toto helped me drag my bags out of the car, and she disappeared through a small door inside the giant one, made some resounding clicks and thunks, and swung it open to dazzle me with the view of my new home. There was an elegant courtyard with a large fountain, and a hand-woven indigenous hammock hanging from 2 of the many columns holding up the roof. It was a house with a colonial-style inward focus, all of the rooms opening on the central atrium, and few windows on the exterior, few but large, all with intricate black iron bars. The walls were painted in a warm 3-color wash that made it look dirty, but in a nice way, rustic. There were terracotta pots everywhere with purple basil, rosemary, and roses. Hibiscus bushes nodded their blossoms at us as we rolled the luggage in, and a handsome brown dog came scampering out of somewhere to greet us with a red bandana around its neck. Elizabeth showed the first sign of affection since I'd arrived, bending down and reaching out to hug him, mewling in a falsetto of, "Who's my pretty doggy? Who's my pretty doggy? Did you miss me? Did you?" "That's my dog," Toto muttered quietly in English. "John," Elizabeth said, "this is Chumiliano de la Barba de Leche. His name," Toto said, "is Chumil." "That's the name you gave him," she corrected. He ground his teeth and looked at me for agreement. I didn't know whether I should give it or not. While Elizabeth was loving on the doggy, Toto showed me to my room, which had a huge bed that took up almost all the floor space, and an expensive-looking hand-woven bedspread. The cream and raspberry curtains were tied open with braided ropes and tassels, letting in the soft glow of the evening. We set my bags on top of the bed, and he led me back out to the kitchen, where Elizabeth was cutting lines of cocaine on the countertop. Now, I do not like cocaine. I liked it once, the first time, but that was because it was close to pure and I was tripping on acid. But ever since then, it made me feel awful because it had been cut with God knows what. But you know how it is, when someone breaks it out at a party, starts divvying up lines with a card on a mirror, they become the center of attention. It's because real coke is the caviar of the drug world at $1,000 an ounce, but probably no one you'll ever know has done pure cocaine. As soon as it arrives from Colombia, it gets 6 grams of either dextrose or lactose to the ounce, or borax. Dextrose makes it sweet, so it's more obvious, and lactose doesn't mix well enough, but still they're used. Because most people, don't know shit. They only want to do coke because of the illusion of wealth and status, which is a big joke because since it's obvious you can't ever get the real stuff, the stuff that is a symbol of wealth and status, they have the great big stamp of sucker on their foreheads. They'll all get caught up in the tragic perceived glamour of being cokeheads and are addicted to, at the end of the day, dextrose and lactose, or borax. In my opinion, the real peer pressure is when nobody says anything, nobody pushes, just looking at you and judging you for not joining in and doing whatever stupid thing it is everybody else is doing. Just a bunch of people watching you without saying a word, and it's their silence that eggs you on to do something you don't want to do more than words ever could. All Toto had to do was snort a line and hold his rolled-up Quetzal note interrogatively towards me. Elizabeth watched me expectantly, and as much as I hated to, I took and fitted it to one nostril, bent my head to the mirror, concentrating on not making eye contact with myself to avoid my own disappointed stare. I paused, wishing I did not have to do it, wishing I was anywhere but there, but I shut my eyes and sucked the line up hard into my nose, feeling that aspirin smell in the back of my throat, the sting of it in my head, and it burned like it really should not have. I don't know what it was, but it was wrong, and I felt a sinus infection start that would last 3 days. Then Elizabeth had her first line, grimaced, and stood up straight, rubbing her nose. For some reason, it reminded me of a dog eating peanut butter. "Ow," she said. "You didn't wait for the acetone, did you? To evaporate." The way she said it, it sounded like a very indirect accusation, reminding him that he did not bother with the acetone at all, but without confronting him on it. Toto shrugged. "It feels fine to me." "Nah, it's not bad." It seemed like she was trying to cover up for not liking it, so it didn't look like she agreed with me, even though I hadn't said anything. They kept snorting, bugging me to have more myself, but I said, "No thanks." "What?" Toto asked. "Is not good enough for you?" Shit. "I just don't really do coke anymore." "Oh, listen to him. I don't really do coke anymore." "You never did do coke, not real coke like this." Real coke, I thought. Real coke doesn't burn, asshole. But I wasn't going to survive the first day if I got into a fight with this guy. I knew it. It reminded me of being back in Terry Griffin's house. My baton and bear spray were in my luggage in another room, and I could see the bulges of guns in various places under his clothes. I looked at Elizabeth, and now knew why she looked like hell. Why she'd been scratching and picking her nose in public without seeming to care. My girlfriend was a junkie. She didn't have access to any in her grandma's house, so she was able to put on the dog, as my father had said. Fool me into thinking I had hit the jackpot with a successful, intelligent young lady of good breeding. And now I was stuck here, at least for the moment. I noticed a roach lying on its back on the floor by the base of the counter, and for some reason I kept looking at it. It was still alive, and every now and then it would make a half-hearted attempt at righting itself. As soon as they'd snorted up the last of it, verbal diarrhea hit them, and they started storytelling, both of them acting a ridiculous tale out with complete song and dance, there in the kitchen, tag-teaming the other with interruptions and clarifications, and swooping in to take the spotlight whenever the other paused long enough to light another cigarette. It was all so fast, their stream of consciousness rambling, that I couldn't follow it. A few pieces I recall about when they had lived somewhere and decided to open a hotel with some other guy in a small town near the lake. The problem was that the road narrowed the last little bit up to the house, so a taxi'd have trouble bringing guests up to the front door. They had tried to convince the neighbors that if they all sacrificed 2 feet of their front yards to make the road wider, the entire neighborhood could benefit from the new flow of customers. But no one agreed. You can't just waltz into a new place and tell the people that live there to give up even an inch of their land. So, out of frustration, the 2 men just grabbed hoes and shovels and started widening the road without anybody's permission. Now, street justice is big in Guatemala. Most people don't call the cops because they know the cops are useless. At best, they can't get to a crime scene in good time because they have no gas in their trucks due to the misappropriation of tax money by the last several presidents. At worst, they are members of their own gang, the worst gang in the country, so the people often take the law into their own hands. The neighbors and their friends came out of the woodwork, and Elizabeth abandoned her boyfriend and their new partner. "Just took off," Toto said. "Not a word to either of us." "You seem too busy for me to interrupt. Just ran away and left us at the mercy of a lynch mob." "Oh, please. It wasn't a lynch mob yet. It was a lynch warning. And see, you didn't get killed, did you?" "What kind of shit is this? You left us behind. You chose to ignore the wishes of the people, and I took the opportunity to go get us all lunch, which is my prerogative as a woman." "See," Toto asked me, "this is the kind of woman you want. She'll never have you back. You turn around and there's nothing but dust from her tracks." "It's not my job to have your back." The whole while they were talking, I would glance over at the dying roach, watching it twitch, punctuating their words with little kicks of one little leg. They somehow segued into another story where they had a pickup truck and they had been told not to take this old dirt road up a hill, even though it was a shortcut. They decided to ignore whosever advice that was and went on up the hill, right into the teeth of bandits with guns. Toto slammed on the brakes, throwing up a cloud of dust, and threw it into reverse, and Elizabeth was belly laughing at the memory of her realization that windshields don't stop bullets. She repeated that revelation a few times, laughing harder every time. I wish I found it as funny as she did. Really, the Elizabeth Morrow show isn't as charming when it's fueled by coke instead of weed. Or, I began to realize, maybe it was never charming, and my standards were just rock bottom low when I saw it because I was high too. They told me about scopolamine, this drug used to treat Parkinson's, which you could grind into powder and blow into someone's face to turn them into a zombie. Go up to an ATM where someone's about to make a withdrawal, and they'll not only take out all their money and give it to you, they'll get into your car and do whatever you want for up to 4 hours. "It's the best," Elizabeth said. "Put the powder in between the pages of a magazine and just wait for someone to pick it up and start flipping through it. They're your slave from then on, and they won't have any memory of what you made them do. Great for breaking the ice at parties." I tried to keep my face from registering shock. Just nod, I thought. Just nod like you aren't disgusted and get out of this as soon as you can. It also made me nervous that Toto kept being nice to me with a transparently false sincerity. It was so painfully obvious that he was only pretending so he could trick me and lure me into some trap that I felt he knew I knew every time I looked into his rapist's eyes. At some point, Elizabeth said I should jump into the shower and wash off that airplane smell before we went out. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Bistro Cinq." She produced it Bistro Cinq, which I guess is the way you say it, but it sounded really pretentious the way she said it, like a junkie rubbing it in your face that she can speak French. I'm trash, but I'm still better than you. I could feel a tension between the two of them, and knew that they were waiting for me to be naked and vulnerable in the bathroom so they could do something against me, as if all their thoughts were on the air. While they were telepathically communicating with one another, they were sending me the same messages without realizing it. "Lead the way," I said.